Okay, so we'll go to item 5, page 6, confirmation of open minutes. I'll move, seconded by Councillor Jeff. All those for, any against, carried. Will item 6, page 27, all those for, any against, carried. I seconded by Jeff. Item 7, page. Item 7, page 43. Moved by myself, seconded by Jeff. All those for, any against? Yep. No.
Doing it fastest, but we can't. I can't even get to the pages, so I don't even know what is there.
Okay.
And some of these
page
things.
46, Gary. I won't take the vote on that one yet.
Okay. Well, there was another one you did too, which no way I got.
Page 27, that one was, but it's through. Page 46.
That was the chief executive pay rise. You missed, Gary. You voted for it.
46. I object.
Yeah.
My name is excluded from being in attendance. There is evidence to suggest on page 10 of the public excluded that I was there for the public excluded part, and I was also there for the open part.
Okay, so we'll leave those minutes till next time, I think, unless Democracy's got a...
We can make that change.
Well, how do you know?
Yeah, well, we haven't noted apology, so I suspect that it's just an omission from the.
It's an omission. I wasn't an apology. I was there.
Exactly. I agree.
I was there when the bats were brought out, so I do remember that.
Yes, I was on.
Okay. Okay, all those for?
With that change.
Yeah, question? Oh, we're on page 43.
Question about
46.
Because I see I left early, but I do remember being there for the full bat presentation. So what did I leave early for?
Sorry, what was your?
Well, because there's no time, so there's no way of knowing. But I know I listened to both of those. So
Yeah. So the way we manage attendance around this, in order not to go through the prescriptives, because staff step out of those briefings on a number of occasions. So in order to reduce the burden on my team in terms of, because in the chamber we do it electronically via your card, in the committee room it's a far more manual process. What we indicated at the beginning of the triennium we would do, we would just indicate whether you were there for the full sessional part of it. Now if you arrive late or leave early, or if you hop out for an hour in between to take another meeting, then you're noted as your attendance as partial.
okay, but just in this one, I was interested because I listened to both of those in full. So, and I'll be noted.
Okay. Well, what would be really helpful, councillors, if I may, is when the agenda comes out. If you think we've got it wrong, it would be really great because we keep audio records of these sessions, so then we can figure out whether it's just an error on our part or perhaps sometimes we've confused which day was what. So I can't answer precisely here and now because if you are questioning, we have you down as an apology, it would be, or as for lateness or early departure, which would 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
Are you with me?
That's fine.
Yep.
I think I did say I was going to be late that day, so
yes.
My apologies were given. I was about 3 minutes late.
And I'm sorry, Andrew, but I have to go back to page 31. And I know you're going to say we've moved it, but I just didn't have a chance the way you're going. And look, I totally understand the way what you're doing and why you're doing it. Okay, all right. So just can we be clear on the resolution on page 31, bullet point 3, does approving the prospective financial statements include approving the balance in the books methodology, did it? What page? Page 31. I just don't know if that deserves a separate bullet point or it might be inclusive of the prospective financial statements. Because I was pretty sure we approved that as a standalone item, and I could be wrong. Maybe we approved it inclusive of that overarching thing.
We approved it as a standalone item at a previous meeting. So my understanding and recollection was at a August meeting we approved that as our measure, and so
August.
Yep. well before that. I think it was August or thereabouts. Yep, sorry, I'm getting a nod. Look at that.
Did we? Oh, okay.
Okay, yep. So we effectively approved our framework.
We proved that in August for the 10-year plan deliberations.
For the development of the 10-year plan. Because we had recommendation back from the Revenue and Financial Task Force. That got effectively tabled in June.
Okay.
Some discussion got adopted. Then we prepared the 10-year plan as that as a premise.
That's cool.
Draft.
So do you mind just confirming, you've got a very good memory, Richard, but can you just confirm that the balance in the books measure has been formally approved? And you think it has been in August?
Yep, so in another part to it is the draft financial strategy on page 31 encapsulates that anyway, because we defined our
Well, that's what I was asking.
We defined our financial strategy in August, we approved it for the preparation of the 10-year plan, and then that ratified it, so the whole thing's
Okay. And the strategies, the balance in the books, the debt to revenue ratios, those things, eh?
Yeah, it's the metrics attached to it. So we originally adopted the definition, and then later on we adopted the target by which we're going to attach those. And that's what that is doing, attaching the targets.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, Andrew, and I've never seen this in our minutes before, on page 34 and 35, we've redacted stuff. I don't know what that, I can't remember having seen that. What does that mean?
So
Someone
council
spilled some
made a
ink or something?
decision to release some but not all of information that was managed in a public excluded, therefore it's been redacted.
So I brought a recommendation forward at the last meeting to release information to the media in respect of Victoria on the River, and rather than just copying that part out that we released, what we've done is redacted what we haven't. So we could have just had the section that we had released, but this is an official record of the minutes with it crossed out, just to illustrate that.
Okay, thank you. And that occurs a couple of times through these minutes, doesn't it? 'Cause
It does.
There's other ones that
That's
happens
correct.
as well.
There's two
Okay,
lots of
thank you.
minutes. Yep.
Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, so we're taking the votes on...
No, you've got to take the speaking order.
Sorry. So just so that members are aware of where we are, we're on item 7, page 43. Well, 43 on... 46, sorry. My paperwork's wrong here. Okay. So, questions on that item, Councillor Deputy Mayor Martin?
Can I just restate, these are not minutes, these are notes of a meeting. The staff threshold to record an informal meeting of councillors at a briefing is much lower. Obviously, I think they do a good job. They record who was present for these informal meetings. If an elected member gives apologies that they're going to have to leave early, that's recorded, you move on, and then very brief summary notes, which happens. And these are not formal meetings in terms of the Local Government Act, etc. These are purely informal notes, actually, which we receive and put in our record and for openness and transparency. Thank you.
Councillor Dave?
That was a great question from the Deputy Mayor.
Can the Governor's Manager confirm?
Yes.
I think that was is a very good point, and I was going to make a similar point, that I think we're bloody lucky to have any records of the briefing sessions at all, because in the last half dozen councils we haven't, and it's caused all sorts of arguments further down the track. The only arguments that are really coming out of this is whether someone was there or not, which is the least of our worries, I'd say. Though I did want to ask one thing, if someone declines electronically an invite to attend, should they not be recorded as having apologised because they've given notification in advance?
Yeah, I agree that's the appropriate way we should manage it, to be fair. You should just decline anyway.
Because there's no button that says apology.
There's a grovel button.
Yeah. It usually involves wine.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I just want to take exception to Councillor McPherson's statement about if your name is missed off, it doesn't really matter. I would suggest that following your Chair's report last month, where you commented about elected members not attending briefing sessions, that it's becoming more and more important that our names are recorded if we do attend. So that's why I took exception, perhaps, to my name being left off when I was in fact at the meeting.
for Rob to finish. I didn't say it doesn't matter. I said it's the least of our worries.
Okay.
A synonym, okay.
Councillor Ange.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew. Just since we're sort of a little bit kind of off the topic, but talking about the briefing notes, I very strongly support Dave's question or comment or whatever it was, because some of us are very, very good at using and responding to those electronic things. So if we can agree that when we say decline for whatever reason, that's an apology, that would make, I'm sure, your job a lot easier. And I understand that I've asked Amy to have a look at my attendance to briefings, because apparently I've only been at 4 out of 18 LTP, and yet I was here all last year. So I know I missed a few at the start of this year, but that worries me, because actually, you know, the Times do, or media do report on our attendances and don't take in the wider context. So I think it's important that those are right. Do you agree? Is that a question? I had to make those points of comment, yeah.
Absolutely, we can track
It's a good idea.
online responses, RSVPs to the meetings. And you
Apologies.
will note that briefing notes on 10-year plan briefings don't form part of the documentation that comes back to council. We agreed that again at the beginning of the training, that those briefings for which governance were responsible, we would report in this manner, but those that were part of the 10-year plan are covered by the strategy unit and wouldn't. There are no formal records of them. That's correct.
So let's be clear, there are records, but they're not being reported back through this mechanism of who attended, when and where out of the 10-year plan briefings. Okay, so all those for? Any against? Carried. Page, item 8.
What issues you wrestled with while I was away? I'm back, you can all relax a wee bit now. Thank you.
Page 48. Do we have a mover? Yep. Seconder? Councillor Dave moved, I'll second. All those for? Any against? Carried. Yep. Okay. Okay, so we'll go to page 51 now. Sorry, I'm just working off a sheet that's got the wrong pages on it. Page 50. Okay, so so the Chair's report, I'll just go through it paragraph at a time. So
Are we not doing the one on page 50? The memorandum of understanding with... Oh, that is part of it. Sorry.
So can I what? Okay, yeah. Okay, so we'll start with the Chandu visit. Any questions or comments on that?
Mr Chair, could I comment overall on the report that, including the Chengdu one, that I'm extremely disappointed with the report. Every other chair's report at a full council meeting for the last year and a half, we've had bold, new, big ideas like changing the name of the city and 16.5% rate increases. What's happened this time? Have staff got to you or something?
We haven't got through it yet.
Oh,
so can
okay.
you hold your comments
You mean there's
until?
more?
Can you
There's
hold your
more?
comments for debate?
Wait for the verbal update from the mayor. It's coming.
Okay.
Okay, so so we'll move on from that if everybody's comfortable with that.
Probably there is one thing that arises, not just out of that visit, but anything we have, there needs to be some reporting back mechanism, and the report's held somewhere, and that's partly for the protection of councillors that go to events on behalf of council, I guess maybe in governance they hold some, whether it's an email from someone or the photograph I sent of Martin to prove he was in Wellington the other day, or things like, there should be something like that where we hold a record of the meetings that we've sent and what people have said about them to council. And I'm not talking about formal reports unless we specifically need it for some reason, but I'm saying somewhere that, so if the newspaper publishes that so-and-so went to 17 meetings out of town, then yes, we can show, yes, they did, and this is what they've reported back to council about.
So would you envisage, like the meeting you went to on Monday in Wellington, do you envisage like a brief summary going back to democracy for
Like we did about the Monday before, we actually gave a verbal update at the committee meeting the following day, so at some stage we should give one about the meeting this Monday, for instance.
Yep.
Or Rob and Martin, when they go to Chengdu, should do something.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate and that's good practice, and I expect that the Deputy Mayor will do that in Chinese.
Okay, so we're moving forward now to... sure. Yep.
You're going to bring back a
Okay.
agenda?
No, we're still on the first paragraph.
This is in no way questioning Rob going, but how do you choose who goes on these big trips?
On this one here, it had to be either myself or the Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, got that one.
And then I went last year with
Richard and the
the
likes.
Chief Executive. So this year I've asked Martin to go. I then asked Dave to go with Martin, being the most senior, being a senior person.
Right. You mean in old age or in...
Both. And
Tired of looking after Martin, someone else could do it.
so
Taking walkies, right.
Deputy Mayor declined.
Right.
And so from there, I then, Rob was invited to go.
Okay, no, just in case we get quizzed by it, that's... Yeah. Yeah, no, that's just, I was just making sure we're covered for accountability if we do get asked, because it's a big trip. In no way do I want to go, but and I support Rob going.
There were a lot of elected members that were very pleased to go when they thought the Mayor was going.
Oh,
Okay, any more
thank
questions on that first paragraph? Okay, so we've covered the second paragraph already. So now we'll go to EPA and I'll hand it over to Deputy Mayor.
But basically, I'll be supporting the recommendation. There may be some questions to staff, but I think we have a memorandum of understanding. There's probably not much difference between a sister city memorandum of understanding and the memorandum of understanding we have, but it does upgrade its level to, if you like, the highest nature of a relationship. Look, I'll try and be as concise as I can, but I got this really good letter which I think says it all from a Mr Wilkins in Tauranga last year. He went through the good offices of Peter Boss, our former council colleague who chairs the EPA committee, which I represent the Mayor's office on, and they went as a family, and he said, we were all deeply moved, particularly my father, at the commemorations over the 11th and 12th of October, but particularly the friendliness of the Belgians and the very obvious continuing affection for the association with New Zealand that had its genesis in the horrors and tragedy of this First World War. He was very honoured to read the statement exhortation at the playing of the last post at Menham Gate, which of course you know happens every day. And it was very poignant for him because his wife and two sons laid a wreath that evening at Menham Gate to his wife's great uncle, grandfather's brothers, one of the 55,000 missing soldiers whose names are written on the wall there. And then, of course, the interesting thing is father, my wife's great-grandfather, was in Prime Minister Massey's ward cabinet. His three sons volunteered out of duty. His daughter served in the hospitals and ambulance. The oldest son was killed, as recorded on the Menham Gate. The second returned and died of injuries and gas poisoning not long after his return. My wife's grandfather obviously survived, and his sister never married, largely because, of course, there were a few young men of marriageable age at that time. Being able to read the exhortation on the same evening as they laid the wreath was a great privilege and honour. And I just he says, in the light of my recent experience in EPA, I urge you to maintain and enhance the relationship between Hamilton and EPA. It is important in my view that a major city in New Zealand maintains a relationship with this town and its people. They have an enduring connection with our country as a result of what happened 100 years ago, symbolised by the playing of the last post at Menham Gate every evening. And of course, this relationship was due in large part obviously to the work of former councillor Peter Boss, and I think it's very appropriate in the centenary of the ending of that horrific war where so many New Zealand and Waikato soldiers are there who did not come back, and those who did come back, obviously a huge number of course passed, had very shortened lives as a result. I think we should just make sure that this very unique and special relationship is upgraded. I think this is primarily a relationship of affection, of history, of bonding, but I don't think you should overlook, as a small country, the fact that this town entertains or receives visitors of Hillary Clinton, presidents, prime ministers, because of its significance. And given the fact that Belgium also hosts Brussels, which is the capital of the European Union, there are a range of other broader relationship issues which New Zealand is a relatively, Hamilton is a relatively small city, is right up there, if you like, in that league. And I think it's a very important and unique relationship. I don't see the upgrade to sister city status changes a budget, but it does put it up there. And I think we need, in my view, to give the Mayor the right of judgment when he goes to agree that we would look at a sister city relationship, and I think it just puts it up there, and it is a very unique and important relationship, and very appropriate given the centenary of the end of that horrific war.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. This is at our instigation, not at EPA's instigation at this time. This is an idea that's been generated this end.
No, it's...
We've been invited to attend, and we've been invited to consider lifting the status from a MOU to a sister city relationship.
Cool. I haven't got any particular problem with our relationship with EPA or any of what you said, Martin. My questions relate to when I had hadn't been on the council all that long, and as part of the Chair of Community and Services, it came to my attention that we were sister cities with a number of places, and I think you'll recall, Richard, at the time that I asked, and Lance, that I asked that we had a review of sister cities, how we use them, because there's no point, not in this case, but there's no point in having a sister city that's inactive, and I understand we are sister cities with San Francisco too, which may, or somewhere, Sacramento, there you go, sorry. But you know, the fact that I can't remember that is because it isn't playing a role currently in our civics. So I did ask that a report come back around the way that sister cities are working, the budget around them, what they might look like going forward, and be really quite strategic about that. And I'm wondering where that would occur, because it doesn't seem to have occurred.
No, it's the memorandum of understanding is usually signed by the Mayor, but at the decision of Council to sign it, Mr Mayor. So actually at this very point in time, the relevant staff member is actually working on what is our best strategy for our sister cities in terms of what, more of a fact finding, what we currently do, what it looks like, what the budgets are and so forth. So at some stage, and they're not too...
It's a shame there again, cart before the horse. It's a shame that we haven't completed that and had a look at it before this.
Yeah, so in terms of carts and horses, the memorandum of understanding and the sister city relationship is ceremonial change. The memorandum, effectively, we have a sister city relationship with all of our, sister cities. They're all underpinned by memorandum of understanding. That, and in some cases, it says that this agreement will be known as a sister city relationship, and in some cases, it doesn't say that. So this will not require a change in any contractual obligations. It doesn't raise, the words won't change apart from a statement in the document will say this memorandum of understanding will be now known as the sister city relationship. So in the absence of a strategy or otherwise, it doesn't make a difference to what we're going to do in the respect of this.
Well, yeah, but that wasn't my question. The question was what's happened to the strategy. I asked for this over 10 months, 11 months ago, and nothing happens, and all of a sudden we're now in a situation of considering a sister city without any of that background information. So I would like to know when that piece of work is going to come.
So the point I'm making is that regardless of the strategy, it doesn't change the outcome whether we do this or not. So, you know, it's purely, and I'm going to use this words in the most positive sense, purely bureaucratic and probably at best ceremonial.
Look, I understand that. I'm just asking where the other piece of work is.
Yep,
It's brought to my attention that something that I had asked for never actually came back to me or to us. I asked it came to council. Just also that when I was discussing in general sister cities, I am aware that there is budget attached to them. And this report says there won't be any additional budget. I'm not saying that there will be, but there is budget attached to managing sister cities, and I'd like some, you know, like if they come and we host them and various things, and we do incur some cost around that. So I'd just like some clarity at some stage and transparency about that.
Yep. I mean, of course you can. You're the chair. You can do what you like.
Sacramento, we haven't touched base with them for a long time, but if a mayor from here or a mayor from there would like to pick up the relationship, I would hate to think that we dissolved something or moved to dissolve or thought about dissolving a relationship there that was set up by a past mayor, and it's there waiting for any future mayor or council
I'm not sure that I've said that, Mr Mayor.
to pick up when they like. I'm just questioning the use of a report. We know that when, say, a mayor from Wuxi or a cultural group from Wuxi comes to our city, we look after them, we honour them, we do what we can to look after, you know, to be there, and that relationship may then go dormant for 4 years.
So that's fine, and you have your point of view. I'm just asking where some reporting back to me has gone, because I did ask about sister cities. I want to understand better how we use them, how we get the very best out of them, because I believe that's what they should be there for: relationships and strategic alignment and all of those good things. And I'm not questioning this one in particular. I'm talking about the context of it.
Yep. So just in short, we have, as a council, set our level of engagement with our sister cities by the amount of money we're assigning the budget. So we have a very low-key approach, and our strategy has been to manage it at low-key. Right, so that's what we've done. Our manager of civic and international responsibilities does a very good job managing the ones that are active. And I have asked Justine to look at how we're going to approach them going forward, how we can best leverage technology to maintain them, and also what we're trying to get out of them. Some of them actually have specific requirements in the MOU to extract value out of them. Shendu, for example, in terms of fostering relationships between education institutions and so forth. So at a briefing in after the 10-year plan, I don't plan to bring it back before the 10-year plan. I'll give councillors an update of where we're at, what we're doing, what the opportunities are. But at this point in time, no additional money has been put on the 10-year plan for them, and I'm not suggesting that we do at this stage. So unless someone from a consultation point of view in the community suggests that we should be doing some more, I'm not looking at making any changes to this 10-year plan, but I will bring a briefing back to council in the next month or so. Yeah,
that answers my question. Thank you. And is there any possibility? I support the fact that we do investigates with EPA, and it does seem like a really deep relationship that we do have with them based around history, and that's great. Will we be able to bring a report back? I see the recommendation is slightly interestingly worded. If he reasonably believes it's beneficial to the city, would that be normal, a normal process, or would we expect to, by all means, extend that welcome, but to have at least some kind of reporting back to council?
I think on the last paper we agreed that when somebody went away they would file a report with Democracy. But
no, I'm talking about the decision around it, not the reporting on it.
Look, I think maybe this, traditionally the Mayor of the city has decided who they'll sign an MOU with and who they'll sign a sister city with, and it hasn't come to council. In this case, I've brought it to council because I believe that council should be informed of what's happening and what's developing.
Okay, so I'm unaware
Okay,
of
so
that
this is
because I haven't
actually
seen
a
that
change in
report.
what's normally happened. Normally we get told what's happened. In this case, I'm informing ahead of time of where we're going. Now, maybe I need to hand over to the Democracy Manager just to explain a little bit further about how these relationships work. to the best of her knowledge. So I'll just hand over to Democracy, please.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. So each triennium, these things operate a little bit differently. But what I can say is that typically the management of sister city relationships operates at a mayor-to-mayor level. So the responsibility for leadership in this area typically rests with the Mayor's office, with support from civic events, which is how we're involved. At a practical level, Justine does a brilliant job administratively of dealing with her peers in different organisations, including Sacramento, who we have been in touch with in recent and regular occasions, who have not indicated a desire to interact in a more high-level way with us at the moment. But Wuxi and Chengdu, we do have active relationships with, and I think you'll find that both through the Mayor's, through the CE's exec update, and through a lot of other mechanisms, there has been quite a bit of intelligence about what's gone on there. Plus, as you'll recall, councillors are always invited to those events as well. Your point about strategy, I think, has been well made and taken, and I think the CE has responded in part to say both that that's what we are working on, but equally that the level of activity has very much been set through the amount of funding that was set aside in the 10-year plan. And there is no proposed change in future. I think that what Mayor Andrew is attempting to do with EPA is to bring to the attention of you all the fact that what has been a long-standing relationship perhaps will go to a different ceremonial level, but in practice there'll be very little difference in terms of how we've been operating for some time.
Yeah, I understand that.
Does
You went well beyond answering my questions, which was one, only about the process, and two, about whether it's normal for council to see a report on those matters. That's all. Thank you.
When Andrew visits EPA and the officials of the EPA city government, EPA government and the mayor, the equivalent of their mayor, and we know this to be the case, we'll very likely ask Andrew to say we would like to upgrade this to a sister city level, which I think, as the governance manager correctly says, is ceremonial. In essence, there's no, it ups it. It doesn't. Then I think we need to give our mayor the mandate, in view of the relationship which we developed over a number of years very well through the previous mayor as well. The mandate to say, yes, we will agree to that course of action. And I think why I anticipate that question is simply because this Armistice Day, of course, is the 100th. And so this year, from their perspective of the relationship, is very, very significant, as it is to us. And I want to stress again, one week they entertain Mayor King, Mayor Hardacre. Another week they're entertaining Hillary Clinton and President Obama, like Angela Merkel, literally. So this place has a huge significance, kind of diplomatically as well, in terms of Europe. And I think, thanks to Peter Boss and others, this is how this has evolved has shown great opportunity for our city, and lots of Hamiltonians and Waikato people have visited there, okay.
Yeah, look, you're trying to persuade me for something that I'm already persuaded of. It was only about those two questions. I think we should invite them into a relationship for sure.
Okay, can we move on? Thank you. So the Mayoral Forum and the Waikato Plan. So I'll do my best to explain where we're at with the Waikato Plan. So we're on page 51, Gary. The Waikato Men's business is being driven ahead very well and very robustly, and it's really starting to achieve. And this is Waikato Men's business, and Waikato Men's business has in its mandate that it can report back to either the Waikato Plan or it can report back to the Mayoral Forum. So the mayoral forum, there's a situation where a year ago a motion was put up to lower the number of members on the Waikato plan from 18. I would have liked to have seen it come down to 7, and where my rationale for 7 was that would be an agile group that could move quickly and let things happen. Now, at 7, what I saw was an independent chair, and then one person from iwi, and I'll cover off the well-beings in here, so they would cover off the cultural, business, which would cover off the the economic, and I saw that the iwi representative would be appointed from Tainui. The business would be appointed from Waikato Men's Business, who are the major business force driving forward and dealing with central government on issues in our region. Community, and I saw that covering the social side of the well-beings. One member from local government, which I'd imagine under this government could well be somebody like Jamie Strange, and that position would change as the government's changed. That's government. So one member from local government, which would be the mayor, the chair of regional council, who would report back through the mayoral forum, and one person from MB. Now, for some reason, the resolution that was put up 9 months ago, 10 months ago, seemed to have got forgotten or ignored, and on Monday we appointed 6 more people, I think, to the committee, which brought it up to 19, I think, and with another person being appointed at the next meeting. And I just and when I brought up the fact that there's a live resolution on the table to move the numbers down to 12, the elected members around the table seem to agree, but the non-elected members away from the table were actually disrespectful to me when I brought this up, and I'm not comfortable with what happened or how it happened. And I've got serious concerns about Waikato Men's Business, with the Waikato plan and what happened with the waters. We're supposed to be working together, and we couldn't pull that through together, and that's probably the biggest collaboration we could have had with our neighbours. And so I guess I walked away from the meeting very disillusioned. So I know I'd like to say this in a nicer way, but I just don't really. I've just got to be honest and say how it went. What's really unfortunate is the iwi who were voted on were actually very, very well qualified and very good representatives to the group, which made it very difficult, because it wasn't about the fact that we didn't want those iwi, or for me it wasn't about the fact I didn't want those iwi on there. They're very, very good people. In fact, it wasn't about any of the people who came on, it was the fact that we've got a resolution to downsize and we were upsizing. So anyway, we put forward a motion to say that we would look at the Waikato plan and how it fitted in with Waikato Men's Business, with Future Proof, and with the other multiple layers of things. And another thing I've thought of since is Momentum actually have a very similar model that they're working with along the same lines as the Waikato plan. So we've asked for a report to come back reasonably quickly, because this council has a resolution sitting on our table, which I made them very aware of, that come June we may choose to leave. And so we need this report coming back to just say how it fits in, and what crossover it has with other legislation that's in place, and where we're going to go in June. So that's really probably all I can say about that meeting. So I'm quite torn about it, and it's put me in a position to have to report back to you as to how I saw it. Yeah. So I'll, Councillor Paula on that one.
Just a question, and it's disappointing that it's got to that kind of state, especially in terms of relationships and being disrespectful.
Well, away from the table, not at the table.
It doesn't matter. There's no cause for disrespect, regardless in that forum. But in terms of our potential leaving in June, can you remind me, did we make a formal resolution of council to that, or is that something that you feel strongly about?
No, there's a resolution on the table. I did democracy manager.
I can't remember
I
when
can
it
talk
was.
to that if you like.
Okay,
Tuesday. So we, there was very much a discussion in June last year about some concerns in two aspects of the Waikato plan. One was around whether or not they're actually affecting any outcomes, and a number of the elected members raised that question. There was actually an amendment put forward to leave at that stage. The Mayor at that point suggested that maybe we give it till a year to achieve some of the outcomes, a year to get the numbers down, and there's a resolution on file that Blair will bring a report back. Well, I'll bring a report back, but Blair will do the work in June to consider those concerns and whether or not, given those concerns, have they been addressed and have we achieved what we intended to achieve, and whether or not we're still worthwhile being part of it. And another part of the challenge was whether or not the amount of money we contribute to it represented a value for money for the outcomes we were getting as well. So we haven't made a decision to leave. What we made is a decision to park that decision until we come back with a report.
Okay, so at that time, will we receive a deputation from some of the other representatives of the Waikato plan so that we can get, you know, a different, well, not a different, but a rounded perspective?
Well, this report that's going to be undertaken about the effectiveness and where this has all landed, it's going to be undertaken by an independent party, so that'll provide that. They'll be doing that work on our behalf, and then we'll be tabling that report in June.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ryan.
Two questions. Who or what's driving the bureaucracy to increase its size and mass?
I'd rather not comment on that.
Okay. I guess the second thing is, if we're threatening or looking to leave, that's going to send a pretty strong message to them. I'd say we'd put a big hole in their operation, wouldn't we?
It'd be like America leaving the UN. They pay half the subs.
Cool. That's all. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
And obviously I have a more benign view, a little bit harder since the Waipa water thing, of course. Just to the Chief Executive, can we just scope that report that's coming obviously to a council meeting? Do I assume that's really going to give us a bit of a summary of what are the key relationships and then what is the budget attached to them? Because obviously I want to just get sorted in my head about the critical relationship we as a city have with Wellington in our own right versus the sort of future-proof, you know, the three, you know, the sub-region versus a wide region. So it's kind of not wanting to see the baby out with the bathwater, but making sure anything is cost-effective and efficient, as the Mayor's looking for.
So it'll cover those aspects. Remember, there's two parts. Blair was already bringing a report back, which was covering a number of these things. That's now going to be supported by some work that's been done from a Chief Executive's point of view about future, about the Waikato plan, as well as other strategic documents, because part of the challenge that was raised, and Mayor Andrew raised it at the session, was we have another of these conflicting strategic documents seem to overlap in places, and where's the hierarchy sit? There's a challenge that Waikato plan hasn't achieved much, but in a much shorter time. Other actions have. Where does the priorities come from? So it's that point now we're getting this muddle, and we just want to unjamble the muddle, which talks a little bit about what you're talking about, future-proof, the corridor through to Auckland, all that work.
Because obviously the cost, you know, the cost of the Waikato plan, because I think one of the members brought a coffee table into the chamber, $1 million coffee table actually, $1 million book. And what I want to delineate is how much is that, and I'm, you know, not being cheeky, $1 million book versus the tangible achievements like, you know, where does Waikato mean business lead us, and we've really, how far have we completed the overall, you know, direction? And in reality, how much do we speak with one voice?
Yeah, so just to be clear, there's been a lot of mixed terms here.
Sure, absolutely.
Mayor Andrew was challenging the where we were at the Waikato plan.
Yes, the governance of that.
Waikato means business.
Separate.
We've always been very supportive of in terms of they are getting lots of runs on the board. They're setting themselves up for the structure. They've previous reports have come to this council and there's been endorsed from this council as actually achieving things. So make sure we don't confuse the two.
Yes.
This is about the Waikato plan.
And I think where the Mayor has a legitimate concern is the overall plan is fine, but if in fact the governance group of the Waikato plan become a de facto regional Waikato governance as far as the government is concerned, then I think we have some problems. So what I'm looking for is to refine my understanding of the role of the mayoral forum, which is Greater Waikato, and then refine the understanding where, in fact, the issues that we have with Wellington are more essentially with the sub-region. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and the last paper is a deferral, so I'll take it that you've read and understood that at the bottom of page 51. Okay, so the recommendations are on page 52. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Paula, Councillor Paula, sorry. Yes.
Sorry, because
sorry,
I'm on your EPA committee. Bossy would kill me because I'm on his EPA committee. I have to second. Sorry, Paul, I'd want to second that because Bossy would take my neck. I don't want that.
Would you like to move it?
I will move it. That will keep Peter Boss really happy.
All right.
I'm under duress yes, I assure you. So I'll, seriously, with great pleasure, obviously I move that as your rep on the committee.
Okay, so I'll second that. Councillor Paula.
A few brief comments in debate, if I might. Firstly, on the EPA, my questions, I do not want to be taken as not supporting a firm relationship with that country and that place. That you're quite right, this year would be the year that we would do something meaningful. But so the debate we had before wasn't in relation to doing it. The other thing I just want to talk about is it's disappointing to me to find ourselves in the situation of the Waikato plan. Obviously, I have a long history with it and understanding of where, except in recent times, understanding of why and how it evolved and what it was supposed to achieve. Now, remember that Waikato means business is actually a product of the Waikato plan, and it devolved from that, became a functional arm of the Waikato plan. The Waikato plan was also developed at a time when government made it absolutely clear that it expected regions to operate cooperatively, to share strategic direction, to focus on priorities, to give effect to the regional policy statement, to seek regional level funding from government and the likes. I certainly accept your point that a committee of more than 14 would be unwieldy. It should really now have been bedded down and being able to be rolled over by a much smaller committee, having joined the dots. There are some very good things in that plan. I don't think that everyone around this council understands all the detail of it because we haven't had a full workshop with the detail shared or presented for some considerable time. And I do believe that that would be useful because we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are some things that maybe are not functioning as well as we would like. There will always be some things where the city has a different view from the other 11 councils of the region. But let's not throw the whole thing out without understanding what parts still serve us well. And if we can repair and redeem the relationship that we have with the wider region, I would urge us to find all ways to do that. Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for your report. And I concur with your comments about the Waikato plan. I went to the opening of it and was extraordinarily underwhelmed and thought from the moment that was just it was just a bureaucratic rat trap, and I could see very little coming from it. So I'm glad you've reached that conclusion now too, or maybe not quite in my words. Thank you.
Councillor Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Andrew. Yeah, I understand the need, for us in this region to speak with one voice and the need for us to plan carefully, but I I also like one of the things I like about this council is that I think we're results oriented rather than process oriented. We want to get things done, and I'm totally unconvinced at the moment about the value of the Waikato plan. So I'll be looking forward to, with a semi-open mind, to hearing to seeing Blair's report and getting a bit more information. But it's certainly way up in the air for me at the moment.
Blair's report and an independent report.
Can I talk before you wrap up? So I just want to make it really clear that the relationship between myself and the other mayors is very good, and I'll call it healthy, and that there is a mayoral forum where all the mayors from the region meet and talk and discuss, and that Waikato means business is very much can continue to operate and has links back as its reporting mechanism to the mayoral forum. So that's not going to get tripped up at all if Hamilton did pull out of this. The report's still out, and the report may come back and the report may find a way through, but for this to work at all, it needs it to be a small, agile, tight group who can make decisions and then report back to bigger groups from those sectors, and those bigger sectors report in through one person, and that would certainly help, but it's not the way it's heading. Deputy Mayor.
Just on the Waikato plan, I mean, obviously, you know, I think it has a place. I think it has the issue of one voice is very important. However, I agree that we need to just fine-tune around some governance and direction issues. Obviously, our core document is future-proof for us as a sub-region. The core group in terms of leading this region, essentially, I think is the Mayor's Forum. I, as Deputy Mayor, from time to time go as an observer, and I think Alan Livingston is doing a brilliant and excellent job as chair of that forum. But I would say that I get a bit worried if Dave Mack brings his table back in and talks about $1 million coffee book. I've got to have enough robust rejoinder to say, no, it's not $1 million book, it's doing this, this and this. Personally, the Mayor has flagged for a very, very long time his problem with a governance group of Waikato Plan that is now 19, which is I don't see that as, and I think what I want to know is what I want to avoid is if we reflect on the Waikato waters, and I know we all had different views on that, and we suddenly thought we'd come to a position that might be the compromise, and I guess at that report we need to actually say, well, what in these initiatives have we spent to date? And the waters is a good example where we spent X money in all good faith of ratepayer money, but at this point that particular exercise hasn't gone anywhere. So I guess, Richard, what I'm looking for, and this is in a collaborative way, it's not to pick holes, it's just saying, right, objectively, coldly, what have we spent, you know, what has been our return, and then objectively, coldly, what is in the best interest of this city to promote Hamilton and our immediate region as far as our relationship with Wellington and others is concerned. And like Andrew, I want to stress that I do think the Waikato means business is a very good model, and I wish that particular one. And I will, of course, approach this report, Mr Mayor, with a very open mind.
Okay, just before we go to the vote, can I just ask for your forgiveness before we keep going with you, Mark? Angela had a verbal update for us, which I was supposed to bring as my report and I'd forgotten. Is that right? Is this where it fits in? So sorry, Angela, but can I hand over to you now on a couple of issues from a webinar that Angela attended yesterday?
Yeah, I did also see in the myriad of emails that we get on a daily basis, the CE had given an update the day before, so on Tuesday, and I attended the webinar on Wednesday, so I'll be very, very brief then.
Thank you.
So look, I attended the webinar, Councillor Henry was there as well, and I just wanted to I see from the CE's email that in terms of the changes to the local government amendment or the local government amendment more bill bringing in the community wellbeings, that a submission is apparently in hand according to your update, and that's coming to council. So that is done. So just as well I read the email, but there were a few questions, and I can rate that I raised that I thought was a little bit interesting, and the answers actually that we got, but we can leave it till then. But in terms of the online, the other bill, the Local Electoral Matters Bill, some of the key changes in there, and again, CE, you've put it in your email. But I think if the majority of council is interested in that, we're going to have to operate fairly quickly, because if we want it to be considered for elections for 2019. There was just a couple of things that won't be open to all councils, which was my initial understanding. It is still going to be limited. And there are 9 councils already working with LGNZ. And when I spoke to the governance manager yesterday about it, we did express some interest in being involved in those discussions. However, we didn't get a look in, so I was a little bit disappointed in that. But yeah, I guess my message update. I mean, being part of the team, I'm just giving information, spreading the love and giving the information back. But I see from your email, see, you've taken my thunder. But if we want to move with online voting, I think my advice would be to get Dale Ossowski down and have a conversation at the next briefing, because we really would. It hasn't gone to select committee yet, so submissions aren't open on that yet. But when that happens in the next couple of months, decisions won't be made till probably November, December, and there's very little time to get ready for October next year.
Sorry, point of clarification. I think what I would want from the governance, I recall, rightly or wrongly, there's a resolution of council from the previous term that we did not participate in that trial, or the trial.
That's the first
and I'm wondering,
trial,
as part
yeah.
of background, that could be also provided.
Yeah.
So could we ask Democracy Manager if we could... oh, you've done something? Okay, far away.
After speaking to you, Mayor Andrew, about the verbal update in anticipation of a request, we've put a placeholder on the briefing for the 26th of April, and Dale Ossowski is available to come and talk. Interestingly enough, Deputy Mayor, he forwarded Brendan and I a copy of the newspaper article that related to Council's decision in the last triennium, and you're correct, we have that resolution on record. But he's happy to come and talk to you about the implications and what changes are being proposed, and what, if anything, you may want to consider or think about as a council.
Because they would be the ones delivering that service to us if I think we have already made that decision to carry on with them for the next
yes,
election.
although I don't believe it's as straightforward as that. Brendan, do you have any comment to make?
And it won't be cheap.
Afternoon, councillors. So in terms of who would be the supplier for providing the online voting, that would be up to each individual council now to determine, unless councils want to group up together and appoint someone. So the likes of Independent Election Services, Elections, which is the other crowd in New Zealand, some overseas companies also do it, would be up for the running, but they would have to meet certain security tests that are put forward by the central government, which have yet to be, put out there. So it's probably a bit early to tell as to who those providers could be at this stage.
Okay, so are you still comfortable to go ahead with the briefing, and with that information?
I think from the questions and the conversation with Raymond from the webinar that went for over an hour, that would be really good.
Okay, so...
Yes, is that on?
And
is that the local
update on Tuesday?
Yes. So okay, and it's under the heading of new local government bills. Okay, thank you.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Angela.
Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you, Brendan. Yeah, and we are in the middle of debate, so I'm sorry about that. That normally wouldn't be appropriate, but I've just had forgotten clean about it. So we're in debate. Questions are over, and we're voting on the chair's report, and we're back to Mark.
Great, thank you, and I'm actually glad that came in beforehand because it's something I feel very passionately about. Having sat on the Well Trust where we did have partial online voting, it worked extremely well. So I'd be very keen to look closely at this. I think actually local government is dragging the chain on this now. I mean, if they're having a crack at census with online, then we are way behind. So I'm looking forward to that work. I just want to draw back to your discussions about the meeting, and I was quite disturbed to hear how you were treated at a meeting, and for you to say that you were treated disrespectfully is a pretty high bar, actually. So I just want to say thanks for what you're doing for us in those respects. I agree with you and Councillor Taylor. When it comes to bureaucratic flabbery, there's a lot of it around, and it's easy to create bureaucratic empires. So I like the fact that we are pursuing a nimble thing and putting other big groups on notice that they need to be serving a purpose if we are going to be involved. You know, I don't think we need to be afraid of the situation that if we pulled out, it's kind of like getting a divorce and then your ex-wife winning lotto a week later. We don't have to worry about that sort of stuff if it's coming back through the mayoral forum. I think we're well covered. So, yeah, keep it up and thanks for what you're doing. I'll support your report.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, do you want to write a reply?
Thought about divorce or separation. At the moment, I think we do some good conciliation and talk. And the right to reply is that I'm looking forward to the neutral, detached report that we're going to be given, and go from there. And thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the board to vote.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Okay, we now move to item 14 on page 125. I'll move. Do we have a seconder? Councillor James? Yep. Councillor Gary.
I don't approve of a number of these things, so I've raised these things before, so it's probably no point me going on about them again. I'll just vote against them when the vote comes. Like the rail services and the cycleways, etc. But there are parts of it that I do agree with. Psychopaths. Psychopaths.
Okay, we'll go to the board to vote. Oh, sorry, Angela. You're...
No.
Okay. Sure.
Ask one question, and that's on page 130. I'm just questioning why Hamilton City Council, this is paragraph 5.3, Hamilton City Council would urge caution to Waikato Regional Council in taking this approach, and it relates to 5.2, which is about the council taking on external debt. I wasn't aware that we had previously discussed that. So it just came as a surprise to me that that comment was in there.
Yeah, so I asked for that to be included, and what I based that on is that at the moment Waikato Regional Council doesn't have any external debt.
I gathered that.
They borrow off themselves.
Yep.
And my concern is that we fund Waikato. I would never make a comment like this against towards Waipa or Waikato, but we actually fund Regional Council by close to 50% of their income. And
our ratepayers do.
Our ratepayers do, yes. Yep. And so I believe that we have an interest in, a close interest in what they do financially. And I believe that if they do start, there's a possibility if they start, because we know they've got large amounts of money in holding in different funds, and at the moment they're doing internal borrowing from their own funds.
Yep.
Firstly, I struggle to see how by taking money externally at retail, how that could be cheaper than taking money internally. But secondly, I think I have a fear that it's opening a door, and in 10 years' time you'll see that it won't be $50,000, $50 million, it'll be $500 million. And they don't have the infrastructure issues that local councils have. And so they don't have the reasons to borrow large amounts of money for a new road or a new bridge, or that type of thing, and I just feel that we have a real interest in it. So
Do we know what they're actually borrowing the money for?
no, I
They
don't.
don't state that in their 10-year plan? Because
I'm sure they do.
it
But
was intergenerational debt, then I would argue that may have some justification, but obviously we could disagree on this, but I would think that if it was intergenerational debt, then there could be some justification that cost to do whatever they're going to spend the money on does have some justification that it is then paid for by the next generation who get the benefit or continue to get the benefits from that expenditure.
yeah, and I understand that. But if you've never had intergenerational debt before, and you take intergenerational debt today, you're now stealing off the future for the past, which has never happened in the past. So it's stepping over the chicken wire, and that's my concern.
I quite agree with that, but I just wondered whether the money was being borrowed for some particular project that they may never have previously done, and hence it's triggered something that would be of an intergenerational nature.
No, I'm not aware.
You
So.
may know, I'm trying to see whether Sean does.
Yep, it's for flood infrastructure, and they have indicated that it's for so what they've written in their 10-year plan is that by borrowing externally rather than internally, one of the reasons for that is that they can line up the timing of the funding and the paying of that back with the life of the assets that they're investing in. So there is that, and it's mainly flood infrastructure assets. They make a few points in their 10-year plan that if they borrow, and the reasons they're suggesting borrowing externally rather than internally is that for that reason, for the reason that if they borrow internally, they lose some of the balance they've got in that portfolio of investments because it's relatively small, I guess. And their external advisors have suggested that they'd be better off borrowing externally.
So they have
that's what they've written.
They've never done that sort of
infrastructure for or against.
So they've never done that sort of infrastructure in the past.
I couldn't comment.
No, because I guess my argument was if it was a brand new project that they'd never done before, and here was a brand new justification. Look, I'm quite happy for it to stay in there. It just was something that I don't recall us having discussed when we had the briefing, so I'll leave it in there.
Paula.
Yeah, I was just interested in the process of reaching agreement in those workshops, because I do remember having a discussion, because I spoke against us interfering. Sorry, that's a loaded word. I said that I didn't agree with us telling another council how to manage its finances. I do know something about the flood schemes too, and where they sit with that. But people can ask me about that later if they're interested. Just what's the process though, because there were a range of views around the workshop, and yet no matter what the range of views are, we nearly always land where we started. I do notice you said urge caution as opposed to do not take this approach. Was that a response to the feedback, a softening perhaps?
I think, Mark, you were at this session, were you? At the briefing?
Yep, I was, and so I wrote that. So the discussion at the briefing, you were right, there was disagreement on this.
There was a range of views, yeah.
Absolutely. There was a range of views on this point particularly. So what we agreed at the briefing was that we would include it in the submission, and then you could debate to take it out at this, when we finalise the submission at this meeting here.
Okay.
So that's what we've done.
Okay, so I can talk to that in debate. Sorry, one further small question. Mayor Andrew, you refer to Hamilton contributing to 50% of the rates of the regional council, but that's only the general rate portion, isn't it? It's not their overall revenue, it's their general rate, because a lot of flood schemes are targeted rates, or a large proportion of targeted rates and a small proportion of general rate. So it would be incorrect to assume that Hamilton ratepayers are paying across the board for other flood control areas. They're only paying a general good portion of that. The rest is all on a targeted rate.
Oh, you would understand that, you've been the chair
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
for-
so that's my understanding. And so, yes, we do pay a considerable amount of rates to the regional council, but when you take into respect all their targeted what's the other type of rate? Differential ratings, we don't contribute as much as some other areas do in some items of their work, I think it's fair to say. Anyway, thank you.
Good point, Paula. Councillor Gary.
Thank you. On page 131, paragraphs, the 11 paragraphs, talks about funding for new catchment works. And at 11.3, suggests that under this scenario, beg your pardon, the impact is that citywide erosion works will have to be significantly reduced over the course of 10 years. And it then, this is our commentary, under this scenario, erosion could worsen or put property at risk. That's kind of a core function of regional council, that sort of stuff, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so what are the this could worsen or put property at risk? That to me is quite a red flag. I wonder if you'd expand on it, please.
I might just ask if one of my colleagues might be able to help answer that. So essentially the comment that we've made is that we don't think they've made adequate provision for that, and we think they need to make more provision, so we're taking the same stance.
Position, yeah.
I guess that's the generic point. I'm not sure if anyone's got anything more specific
So,
to that.
somewhere I read it was underfunded by 20%, but I can't find that bit at the moment. Oh, yeah, in that same paragraph, yeah. Talks 20%. It's not underfunded by 20%, underfunded by 80%. It's only 20% of the requested funding. Now, the requested funding might be, we might have gone over the top, or whoever's requesting the funding, but. So who's going to help you?
I don't know, I'll sort of...
The
I'll
cavalry's not there?
No, Andrew Parsons has that information and he's prepared for that.
So I guess the background is erosion's been a challenge for some time, and Project Watershed is a collaboration between Hamilton City Regional Council and others to try and deal with erosion, because of the increasing challenges in the stormwater space, through national policy statements on fresh water, because of the river vision and strategy, and because of increasing development, which increases the rate of runoff. There was a piece of work that was collaborated on just around trying to determine what was best for a growing area and how that was best shared amongst the parties, so developers, Hamilton City Regional Council. And so what's come through the decision-making process from the Regional Council's LTP deliberations is something less than what we had been working towards. So that's their
Andrew,
decision.
am I right in saying it's 80% less?
It's less.
Well, it just that the wording is 20%, and I don't know who wrote the paragraph, so maybe they weren't talking about that, but that sounds to me to be materially...
So I'm just going to hand over to Ray, who knows the intimate detail on that percentage.
So we've got 7 streams in our city, and we've basically had a look at existing erosion and the potential for erosion, and we have.
Does this exclude the river?
This excludes the river.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So what we've done is we have looked at the potential costs of actually managing erosion. Now, erosion can be due to city growth, but it can also be natural. And so, as Andrew has said, we've got a Project Watershed agreement, which then looks at how we can deal with the growth-related potential erosion, and also how we deal with natural erosion. We have quite a few planning controls in place which hopes to minimise and mitigate that erosion, but with all best efforts, sometimes erosion will occur. So the figure that was presented was really just an example of one particular area, the Te Awakerakapaki stream, which has significant erosion downstream before it hits the confluence of the river. And so just taking that as an example, it looks to us from the Waikato Regional Council LTP that has been significantly underfunded. So that was an example. There are other areas as well that looks like they aren't quite coming to the party in terms of the model that we are using. So we felt that it was best to put in a submission that says we would like you to review what you're going to pay towards new catchment works that would allow us to address erosion in the city.
Okay, thank you. So how, I know this is hard, but how imminent is, I know we've already got slips that we're not on our risk and opportunity yet because we're not even too sure what, so there's some degree of uncertainty, but you've obviously identified areas where there are risks of slips. Am I right in saying that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So there's
And you
certainly
think
some
that-
erosion, and there's also potential erosion as well.
And you think it'll take $100 to adequately mitigate that, and they're giving us $20?
For this particular project, that's what it looks like.
So the concept, and I know this is very hard because it depends on weather and all sorts of things that we don't know, but are we staring at quite a big risk there?
Well, certainly.
And where is this part of the river? I've never heard that.
So Te Awa
I'm glad you spoke it.
Te Awa Kiripaki is in the Rototuna North area.
Oh, I don't live there. Okay, all right.
You just got an earthquake fault to worry about.
Councillor Dove.
No, I'm serious. No, I'm still on. So, is there what? I guess I'm just concerned that we're kind of the people who look after them, even if it's through the Waikato Regional Council. I guess you've at least raised it with them. That to me looks to be a real bad one. Maybe I'm misunderstanding or misinterpreting it, or.
Well, we certainly need them to have a close look again at the funding that they are going to be providing for new catchment works to make sure that we can actually manage.
Okay, so if they're not going to fund it and we've identified it, are we then obligated to A, tell those people, or B, do something about it ourselves?
So we may need to, I guess, have a look at the program that we would like to actually carry out to manage erosion, and without actually doing specific detailed analysis on each of those areas within each of those catchments, you would need to put it through another filter to determine exactly what risk there was to properties. It really depends on the geotech of the area. It depends on how close properties are to the streams. I can't sort of answer exactly what the actual risk would be to each stream and to properties that
Okay, and I'm sorry to keep this going, but we obviously had a reason for telling WRC that we think they're underfunding it.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have done some work.
Yes.
And you're just pushing back and saying, hey, this work does need to get done. If
Yes.
it doesn't get done, and they've got every right to say, no, we're not going to do that, we've got higher priorities. Does it fall back, do we then carry the baby? Do we end up holding the baby, or whatever the saying is?
So we would need to adjust our program.
Okay, which would impact our 10-year plan, wouldn't it?
Yes, I believe so.
Well, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
Shouldn't we haven't funded it yet? Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Dove.
Yeah, just following one part of Gary's questions, it's not my main area, but Project Watershed, I understood that the original way that was supposed to work was supposed to be by joint agreement what the projects were between our council and Waikato Regional Council, and they collected the money from our ratepayers, and that it should be spent within our boundary if it was collected from our ratepayers. That was certainly the discussions held back in about the year 2000. I see Paula shaking her head over there. It was actually before she was on that council that was set up, I believe. I would like us to have a look at the original proposals there, because my clear understanding is at the start, and there may have been some changes since then, they didn't do anything without our agreement and vice versa, and it was an area of their responsibility, but it was jointly undertaken. There was joint agreement to happen.
So if that's correct, that certainly needs to be included in our submission.
And
quite strongly.
Years ago.
So could we ask staff to look into that and then retrospectively to our approval today, get that into our submission, because that's quite...
It was a matter of some contention, and our chair of the Works Committee at the time, what's his name, Grant Thorburn, was our representative on the committee that set all that up and was very fierce about protecting the rights of those who knew him would know he was like that, protecting the rights of the City Council.
So I think, Mark, if you could pull out those original documents, blow the dust off them, and just see exactly what they do say, and even if that meant that you had to call a special council meeting to bring that back in, if you felt you needed to, but otherwise could you ensure that it goes into the submission before the submission is submitted?
Yes. May I make a comment on that, Chair? On paragraph 11.3 of that submission, it's on page 131, we do note that WRC under a joint project watershed funding, HCC has requested long-term plan funding under its own draft LTP, and a third of the costs from Waikato Regional Council under a joint project watershed funding agreement. So we have made reference to the fact that there is a joint project in there, and if you would like us to make that stronger, then I think we can do it within the context of this, but I would note that submissions have actually closed on the Regional Council's 10-year plan, so they've granted us an extension until tomorrow, knowing that we had a council meeting today. So if we're going to make any changes...
The point being, and arising out of Gary's questions, is that our staff are saying more should be being done than they've put in there. So how does the joint part of the joint agreement work?
Yeah, well, I guess that's why we're putting this in our submission. That's what we're saying in this part of the submission.
But I do think it's worthwhile actually looking at those original documents and seeing what they said and what's evolved since then, Mark. So this doesn't have to be until midnight tomorrow night, so bring your sleeping bag. Councillor Paula.
The opportunity to comment, because you have delegated me the responsibility of staying on the catchment committee at least until the midterm review, and so I have been attending with staff, and this is the catchment committee is the one that's set up to talk about the interests of catchment management, including Project Watershed, and we have representatives, staff representatives, and myself attend that once every 2 months, I think it is, and it isn't as clear-cut as what's been made out. Yes, there is a shortfall of funding, but there's a shortfall in funding in the entire zone, the central zone. And if we want additional work done, because it is all around the priorities, which, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. Thank you. Ray. If it's a matter of priorities as suggested, there are, in fact, a number of urgent priorities through the city that the Regional Council is focused on, and this particular one that has been mentioned hasn't probably been elevated as such a priority. There is a process for determining those priorities. There was an annual review and a workshop recently in which priorities were placed. If at this stage, however, something has come to our attention and it needs more priority, then the person acting in that position, being myself, can take it to the committee and ask for that. I do think we should ask for further support and recognising that as a priority. There's nothing wrong with that. Be aware, though, that it will have an impact both on the rates taken from the Regional Council from Hamiltonians for that work, plus we quite rightly, you've observed, we also contribute. The Project Watershed does not meet the whole costs of all of the erosion work throughout the city, and it never has. There's a limit of funding. It's allocated in a process, if you understand what I mean. So Yes, we can alert them to the greater amount of erosion that needs attention in the city. There will be a repercussion for that in terms of rating whichever end it sits at, or it could mean, quite rightly, that other projects within the central zone are bumped down the list. So you need to look at it as a whole picture, not just one part of it. That's what I'm saying.
So,
And I do send the minutes around from those meetings every time that I go.
Yeah, can I just, Councillor Paula, the concern raised was that the money taken from a region would be ring-fenced or from an area for that area. So could you confirm whether the money that's taken from Hamilton City
Yes,
is ring-fenced?
It's all differential rating, and the money that's taken from Hamilton is applied to Hamilton projects. This is about ranking and priority, as I understand it, within that budget. And if we increase that budget to do extra priorities, which of course is our right, well, they'll have to collect more to do so, or take something else that had been agreed to do with the city off.
Could we get a report?
But it's worth having a full report.
Next G&I committee, perhaps, on what happens with project watershed in terms of the finances. We've had that sort of report in previous councils because definitely in the earlier years there were some years where money collected in Hamilton was not spent in Hamilton, which led to some quite serious discussions here. So if we could get a report that tracks that, which must be available from the regional council, that information, not now, not in advance of this, but if we could have it at the G&I committee in the general manager's report, perhaps, that would answer that issue.
I assume that's okay. Yep. Can I also suggest a way forward in terms of the submission is perhaps that if you're comfortable that we've captured the general point in the terms of this written submission, that we go with this as it is, but then we've got an opportunity to speak at the hearings or the verbal submissions to regional council, and so between now and then we can pull some more detailed information together to maybe speak to this point, if that's what council would like us to do.
Yeah, I think we definitely would like to be heard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could I ask the other question that I had, and that related to point 7, the water fees and charges. Is this the same area that relates, these charges, are they the same sort of charges that can be charged, for instance, to that crowd that the regional council had given, proposed to give consent for taking water from the Blue Springs at Pataru? Is that the same area?
Let me check with the experts.
I thought you were a water engineer.
Don't bother sitting down.
So on that particular submission point, we've now got in the order of $10,000 more per year to pay for our charges. If you were a company that was sitting outside the city boundary and you were charged with more water, you had a higher increased water charge rate from the Waikato Regional Council, I guess you could, increase your pricing model on your product that was, the reason for that water resource
Sorry,
use.
that's not my question.
Sorry, can you repeat?
My question is this the same mechanism or law under which they do charge Blue Spring, that crowd that was going to take water from Blue Springs, for instance?
Oh, look, I can't answer that question, sorry.
The reason I'm asking that, there's some legal things that the regional council kept saying they couldn't do, and they couldn't charge anything except to cover costs. That's the law. They told us when they came and presented to us a bit over a year ago. So what I'm wondering is if that's still the law and it's the same charging regime, how come our charge has gone up by 55% unless our water take has gone up by 55%, which would really surprise me?
I assume that, this water charge rate isn't just specific for municipal supply. This is across the board with
Yeah,
fees
but
and charges.
Has our water take gone up by 55%?
No.
Okay, what's it gone up by approximately, rule of thumb,
So
if anything?
So our water take is sort of like, I guess, progressing with growth, and so they are charging a cents per metre cubed, and
So the rate has gone up. So if it's gone up according to growth, it's about 2.5% max. That's what our growth has been in the last year. So if they're charging 55% extra, then their rate, the charging rate's gone up, which is my understanding, the law says you can only charge for administration costs for water. So how come their administration costs have gone up by over 50%? I just think we should be making that point more strongly than we are. I don't disagree with the issues that you guys have raised. I'm just saying it seems like they've concocted a higher charge.
Okay, Mark, did you get the essence of that? Thank you. So we just want to, want to push that point quite robustly. Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you. Just a wording thing around on page 134 and 135 of our agendas, and also the same question about page 137. As regards the, I beg your pardon, 135 and 137. As regards the wording around the Te Awa Cycleway, paragraph 5.2 and paragraph 2.3 on the next page, we're just saying, and it's only a pedantic little thing, we're saying we are contributing that money to Te Awa. We haven't actually resolved that yet in the 10-year plan. So I just wonder if we might not get caught out if we end up not supporting it, and we've got that written in the submission. So would it be okay to alter that?
Yes.
Thank you. That was worth waiting for, wasn't it, eh?
Councillor Gary.
The discussion we've just had sort of begs the question, what are we going to do about it? And I know that's not the item. The item is our submission back to Waikato Regional Council's thing, but I wouldn't mind having staff give us a report or something and just tell us what's happening out there with regard to this catchment where there's some high risk of erosion. Because we
asked for that report for GNI.
Oh, did you? Have you done that? Okay, I was talking to Jeff while that was going on. Okay, sorry.
Okay, so we'll go to the board to vote.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Okay, we move to item 15 on page 139. Yes. It's in confidential, so we need to wrap up what's in public first, so we're close to getting there. Thanks, James. Okay, do we have a mover for this? Seconded. All those for? Oh, Gary doesn't time. Tried.
Turning Kiwi Rail into an approved
Seconded.
public thing do.
Sorry, Gary. Could you repeat?
So just on page 139, paragraph 6, we're going to make Kiwi Rail a approved public organisation. I don't understand what that is.
Can I? Oh, sorry, Andrew.
So I can answer that. So I'll just introduce. So this is Blair Bocott's report. So I'm just
You take no responsibility for it. And his stuff has been
full
shown
responsibility
in the past,
for it, and I'm just filling in for him today whilst he's away. So to draw on funds from the National Land Transport Fund, you have to be what's called an approved public organisation.
Okay.
And so at the moment, Kiwi Rail is not. And this proposal from government is to make them an approved public organisation. Hamilton City already is, and that's why we get the subsidies for things like ring roads and things like that. But the proposal is to make Kiwi Rail an approved organisation also.
That's all this is doing,
That's
really,
all
isn't it?
it's doing.
Yeah. So it's not supporting the passenger rail or anything like that?
It simply
that
means,
will lead on to that.
as an approved organisation, they can propose projects for use to be funded from the National Land Transport Fund.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Leo. Okay. All those for? Any against? Debate, sorry.
I've got some real concerns about this one, because every time you fill your car up, the 66.4 cents go in tax. And that's split up as to 59.5% of that goes to the National Land Transport Fund, which is the one which Kiwi Rail is wanting to tap into. 6 cents goes to HCC, and then we, as a council, get 0.66% out of this. Central government, through Kiwi Rail, owns and controls not only the tracks but also the infrastructure and also the rolling stock. What government is saying in the National Land Transport Fund is that they want rail to compete on a commercial basis with either freight and passenger transport modes with services funded from customer revenue. And here they are saying, hey, let's dig into the National Land Transport Fund, and rail have actually not contributed 1 cent towards it. Whereas commercial operators out there with their road user charges paying anything up to $845 per 1,000 kilometres on their road user charges. I think this is grossly unfair in that Kiwi Rail are trying to take money out of the Land Transport Fund without actually contributing in any way at all towards the fund. So I will be voting against this.
Councillor Dave.
I'm not sure whether Leo has noticed, but there was a change of government about 5-6 months ago, and one of the things that they did and have signalled to us in a number of letters and communications, formally and informally, is that there is a new government policy statement in transport, which is what drives where money comes from to get into the National Land Transport Fund and how it is spent. And for instance, at the Access Hamilton workshop on Wednesday, just yesterday, we had a long discussion about the proposed changes, and one of them is to incorporate rail in the area of what money can be spent from the National Land Transport Fund. And the reason for doing that is because they believe, and as our council has through Access Hamilton as well, that when you're looking at moving people or goods from A to B, that you should look at all possible transport solutions for that and work out the best mix of them. The problem has been for the last umpteen years, and this includes the last Labor government as well, you haven't been able to include rail in that mix. And it's for the first time for a long time, since the late 1980s, I believe, we're now able to say if we want to move a shed load of goods from Hamilton to Auckland, what's the best way to do it? And if rail happens to be the best way, which is in many but not all cases, then they should get a portion of the subsidy that's available. Now that subsidy is not only connected through the fuel duty, that's a very large part of it, but it's not the only way. Government puts in dedicated funds as well, and there are funds from other sources. I think this is a damn good move. I think it's about time. It's quite certain that it would be difficult for them to fund any sort of passenger rail service, or to support extra passing lanes or bridges to enable more rail freight to happen as well as passenger rail, if they weren't able to get a share of some of this money where it's appropriate. Now, the Regional Council, with our agreement some years ago, spent money that it was given for transport generally. We were allowed to be flexible about it. We spent $30-something million on an extra double tracking section, basically a passing lane on the rail line between here and Tauranga. That wasn't to shift people, that was to enable goods to be exchanged more efficiently between our area and the Port of Tauranga. And we were able to do that because we weren't restricted on that case. It was the JOG money, for those who remember that. We were able to be unrestricted in deciding the best transport solutions. Now we're again able to look across the region, across the country, at what the best transport solutions are. That's why we need rail to be part of the transport solution, not standing off to the side.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. I thank Leo for prompting my response here. Well done, Leo. he's absolutely right, and it just reminds me that up until 20-odd years ago or so, a guy in a truck was not allowed by law to transport, and I can't remember how much it was, thank you, 150 k's, 40 miles, yeah, if that was in competition with the railway. So what we had, as we look to be moving toward now, is a government-owned, government-protected, put quotes around the word business, competing against private sector businesses. This is neither rational, economic or morally sound. So thank you, Leo, for reminding me of that. So I'll be voting against it too.
Chair, could we just split out B.1.2 as two different motions, given that they're quite different?
Well, as the mover, I don't agree with that.
So which one do you split? Well, I'm suggesting that the government proposal to make Kiwi Rail an approved public organisation is quite separate from the second dot point, which is the Land Transport Management Regional Fuel
Well, no,
Amendment.
they're not quite separate, actually. They happen to be two pieces of legislation, but they're under the same argument, they both arise out of the government policy statement on transport.
But they're on two different subjects. One's around a regional fuel tax, and the other's around making Kiwi Rail
Okay, there's no point talking over the room on it. Councillor, Deputy Mayor Martin.
No, I mean, with respect, I do agree with Pascal that obviously you want to, in a submission, you either agree with one or you agree with both, you agree with one but not the other. Obviously, I agree with both, and I think the point that came out of that day in Wellington where Dave and I went down on your behalf, and I actually, ironically, chaired a panel discussion which included the Chief Executive of Kiwi Rail, Chief Executive of Main Freight, Chief Executive of Centreport, and the Group Manager Transport of Fonterra Hamilton. And of course, what was heartening is that there wasn't the age-old road versus rail. All of them, including the Chief Executive of Main Freight, were supporting the notion of a mode-neutral public investment into transport. And the Main Freight Chief Executive made the point that they invest in X number of countries, and they themselves are invested in a multimodal transport network. Hamilton has quite a critical interest in this because we are a major city that is going to host 3 inland ports: the existing Fonterra in Te Rapa, the Port of Auckland operation at Horotū, and of course the TGH operation at Ruakura. And from the point of view of a major hub, it is in our interest to actually have adequate investment in rail infrastructure. Of course, that means that trucks take the containers from X point around the city or the region to one of those inland ports. But here's the difference. Instead of having 200 trucks going over the Kaimais or the Bombay Hills, those trucks actually, the equivalent of those trucks are on the rail line in a grade-separated efficient transport system. So all modes of transport still are very viable, but why, as a city that is going to host 3 inland ports with the jobs and the logistics that will encourage, would we want to weaken one of those modes of transport? And why would we not encourage a mode-neutral approach to funding, given the fact that I would have thought a train taking 50 containers on the rail to the Port of Tauranga made a whole lot of sense economically and for whole other reasons. So I just want to repeat again, Hamilton is the home of 3 inland ports that are predicated on rail being a viable part of the transport mix. And as I said, this is not road versus rail. This is what is the most effective means of transport investment.
Okay, we'll go to the board to vote. Apologies, sir.
That came up during. Gary made the point that if the government does this, it'll be giving rail a preference, to use that word, over road. That's not the case. It's legally not the case and practically not the case. The great majority of expenditure from the National Land Transport Fund will still be on road and road-related things, not on rail. It'll simply add rail as one of the transport solutions to that, where it's not at the moment. That's all it does. There is no preference. Business cases will still have to be done for different projects. They'll still have to stack up for rail versus road, or combinations of the two versus other combinations of the two. I think we'd be absolutely crazy not to support this. For one, if you do want a passenger rail service to Wellington and you want the government, for instance, to subsidise our expenditure on the park and ride base, we would not be able to get our 51% subsidy for that if this is not changed, because there'll be no pot of money that we can access for a rail-related project. So think about that, guys. Think about our people often complain to us, our residents, about travelling and there's so many trucks on the road. How are you going to change that? You're going to change that by shifting some of the freight that's going long distances to similar destinations to rail. This is something that the trucking operators themselves support. Martin talked about the biggest one of all, Main Freight, the general manager for the whole country, here down in Wellington at the meeting, and with their new headquarters, or not, new freight logistics centre, I should say, out at Te Rapa, they are talking about mixing rail and road as part of their operation. To support this will support organisations doing that. It won't make it harder, it'll make it easier. They want to shift some of their stuff onto rail. It's more efficient for them, it's more efficient for the company, it's better bang for the buck. At the moment, we can't do that, and we're limited in our transport solutions.
Okay, we'll go to the board to vote.
The motion is carried, 844 against.
Okay, we'll now go to item 16. I see the Guardian, this is a little bit off topic, but I see the Guardian in London today voted Hamilton Gardens in the top 16 gardens in the world, which is not bad to have everybody in London reading that in their print edition, so well done. 25. Okay, so we'll, item 16 I'll move. Do we have a seconder? Page 146, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All those for? Any against? Carried. Item 17, moved by myself, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Sure.
It's just a quirky thing. Because this comes from the committee, I'd suggest as a process traditionally it would be the chair of that committee that would report it in and move it. I'm a stickler for protocol, but I think that is appropriate.
You're totally correct, Deputy Mayor.
You're the chair.
Moving to item 17, moved by who? Yeah, hang on, we'll just find Deputy Dave. Would you like to move that?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Seconded by Deputy Mayor. Yes, Gary.
And I'm just a little confused, and that's often the case. Paragraph 3, all we've got about this is that the council approves 2.3 million be included on the Risks and Opportunity Register for the land acquisition. Is this? Are we sticking by our growth pays for growth protocol here?
I think as Andrew Parsons, could you take the chair,
I can't quite remember.
Please?
So this presumably the 230 to 2.3 million's an underspend somewhere else, is it?
So just do you remember the?
No, I can't remember what it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
Andrew, I'll just get you to update us.
Very quick refresh summary, because not all councillors were present at GNI. So, the first part is that there's a legitimate savings that will be coming through to Finance Committee to go on the Risk and Opportunity Register, regardless of the decision.
So that hasn't been reported to Finance yet?
No, it hasn't got.
Okay.
In the Finance Committee, I had indicated there was further savings coming through.
Yep.
This is part of it.
Confirmation, yeah.
So that's where. So it'll be, if you approve this report, there'll be an offset. So there'll be no extra money spent. So that's a key point. The second key point is that this is about providing a road link between Arthur Porter Drive and Tasman Road. That's part of the strategic network in the area. It's part of the approved structure plan. It's in the district plan. It runs alongside the park and ride facility that council has recently purchased. And although it's not critical for rail, if the rail opportunity were to proceed, it would certainly support that as well. But rail in itself is not the driver for this link. So it's a really important link in the network. At the same time, a large part of the link is owned by a private developer who has legitimate development rights over the land. And it's an opportunity to council to enter into a commercial arrangement with the developer to secure the link now in a form of a partnership, or not. And under the or not scenario, you'd get to bank the savings because it's savings, and the developer would get to subdivide the property into a number of commercial industrial lots. The need for the link would still remain. It's just in the future years, council would have to come through and just deal with the multiple businesses and the effects on the businesses.
So just to be clear, the land the chap owns, which he could, if we don't do this, subdivide.
Yeah.
If it's subdivided, will we have to find another bit of land to get the link?
There's no other bit of land in this area now.
Okay.
So the need for the strategic link would still remain. It's just that you'd have to deal with, I'll make it up, but maybe 10 business owners and their property. So this is an opportunity just to work with one party now, and in a manner that's a cost share agreement. It's still a tough negotiation, so we need a direction from council to try and close the deal, but that's essentially the proposition.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dave.
I just want to add to Andrew's points. The regional council passenger transport people who run the bus services have said that if that link is built, they will shift the route of the Orbiter bus service across through that link to the transport hub that's planned to be built at the back of the base, which will be for rail, yes, but also for buses, but for buses, particularly because there's a lot of pressure on them with the bus services within the base at the moment. It's not big enough to meet the needs that they've got there, and the owners of the base are trying to get them to shift out. And so the most viable place for them to shift is immediately across the railway lines with the overpass that's going to be built to this area, and this linked road would take them straight to that. And they've already passed a resolution subject to that road being built. They would shift the route.
So, sorry, that was my oversight. Councillor McPherson's absolutely right. So but regional council would utilise this link as part of the Orbiter service as well.
Thanks.
Okay, Dave, would you like to speak to this? Okay. Andrew, thank you very much for what you've done on this deal. You're worth your weight in gold. It's just another great deal you've done for the city. So
You're worth your way in asbestos concrete pipes.
$18 million last month, and I don't know what this is worth, but it's just fantastic. So thanks very much.
We're in salary review mode. Don't talk to him like that.
That's $18 million savings to the city last month alone. So, and this is on top of that. So thanks very much, Mark. Sorry, Councillor Mark.
Gold.
Okay. So all those for, any against? You're against? Okay, so, all right, we'll now move into public sorry. Okay, yeah, Amy, could you call it vote, please?
The motion is carried. 1, 2, 3, 4.
12, 1.
12. No, it's 11 for, 1 against.
Okay, we'll now move to go into public excluded. I'll move, seconded by Councillor Jeff. All those for, any against, carried.